Hey, you guys, happy Sunday. I'm here to review right quick the Tyler Perry Netflix movie Straw. All right, I watched it last night, and I gotta say, first of all, Taraji, yeah, okay, that girl knows that she can act. Okay, that girl knows she can act. I mean, I've always liked her as an actress, but you know, just the fact of knowing that she's Taraji P. Henson, right? Henson, and you know that she's playing this role, but then she's playing the role so well that you forget that she's Taraji and that she's actually the character. It's a wonderful thing. I think that the acting by Taraji, Sherry Shepard, and Deanna Teller, exceptional, exceptional. The story started out with her having a really bad day. It was all about this really bad day, and she woke up as usual. Her daughter was laying right next to her, and she was getting up and doing things as usual, doing things as normal. You know, going through the day. Her daughter said that when she was giving her daughter a bath, her daughter told her, "Can I get $40 so they could stop talking about me at school?" They told me the school lunch program. I've had it too much. So all these things is just rolling and rolling. So then she's getting out the house, even though, now mind you, she lived in low income housing, and it's a situation where people can play their music just as loud as they want, with no, they don't care about other people and them trying to sleep and them trying and having children. It was that type of situation. And so then she goes about her day. She drops her daughter off at school. She waves to the lady, and she goes, and she goes to work. The manager is a-hole, okay? A manager was played by Glenn Thurman, and he's an a-hole. I love the actor, but the manager, and we know that manager. All of us have experienced a manager like that, okay? And he's just an a-hole, okay? And so, she's trying to explain to him what's happening. He didn't want to hear it. He just wants her to get up at the cashier. She's probably making minimum wage. I'm sure she is. And it's Friday, it's payday. She tells the landlord on her way out, "Hey, I'm going to get you the check." The landlord said, "Well, if you don't, your stuff going to be on the curb." So she's got all this on her. And then, she gets a call while she's at work from her kid's school. And, and then she gets to the kid's school. She tells the manager she got to go. He only gives her an hour to come back. And, that's stressful in itself, just that he's not understanding. Things happen. And so anyway, during that process of her trying to, get back to school, she gets there and everything. And basically they're taking her daughter into DCFS, care, because they said that, like, she comes to work, she comes to school dirty, she is, whatever. But she was trying her best. And like she said, I don't have gas. So, the gas in the apartment, wasn't running. Therefore, she didn't have heat to heat the water, but she was still washing her. You seen her wash her baby. She's doing the best she can. And so, they didn't care. They went on, they took her baby away. She said, "No, don't take her. She has seizures, and she was a preemie, and this, that, and the other. I worked 2 jobs," she said, "and this, that, and the other." And so they didn't care. They took her baby. So, just that, because you can tell she lives for her child. Okay. And so then, she tries to get back to this job, this no good job, with all that on her mind. Her child has been taken from her. And she tries to get around in traffic. You know how it is when you're trying to get somewhere, and everybody and their mom out there in the street. You can't get around, you run into traffic. And, she tries to, because she's under the gun so much, trying to get back within the hour or whatever, she, goes up on the side. And so she accidentally runs into this cop. Well, actually, the cop, ran into her. He was an arrogant SOB, okay? And basically, it looks like he was having a bad day himself, and he was racist, a bigot, all that stuff. And he told her again, "I'll make good and sure that I kill you," basically. You know what I'm saying? And how is that not supposed to resonate with her? So anyway, the woman cop, she wrote her a whole bunch of tickets. And she asked her so much. She said, "Please, just don't do this. I was gonna get all this stuff fixed. Her registration expired, her license expired. These things that just happen. When you're under the gun, and you don't have enough time to do things in a 24-hour day. And so anyway, she gets back, after all of that, she gets back to the job. By the way, she's sweating through the whole movie. Taraji is sweating through the whole movie, okay? She is not dry. She ain't see one dry moment. Okay. She was just like just bursting in sweat. And it was symbolic of a person just being under pressure all the time. Under pressure, constant pressure. And when you're under pressure, it makes you sweat. And so, well, the majority of people, it'll make them sweat. Okay. So anyway, she gets back, he's yelling at her again. Okay, she tries to take a customer. Okay, I can take you over here. And, all this other stuff is going on in her mind. And, and then he's like, no, let's talk to you in the back. Basically, he fires her. And so she's just like, that's all she needed to get fired too. And she said, well, can I at least get my check? Can I get my last check? He didn't even want to give her that. Talking about, well, you've been fired. So, your check is in the mail, And it was just so callous of the manager, she leaves and she goes to her apartment. It's raining out. All her stuff is out all of her stuff is sprawled out on the curb, including her baby's medicine and everything. And there's a point in this movie where she just screams and yells at the top of her lungs. No, and I just broke out into tears because, first of all, the acting was intense and it was wonderful. But you could feel this woman's pain. You could feel this woman's pain. Somebody like this, or you've been someone like this, and even not maybe to that point, but you've been in that struggle where you just like, oh, and just hearing her, that wail of a cry that she made, it took me out, and so she gathers up a couple things, and one is her daughter's backpack and everything, and it was like a clear backpack. She had a little science project in there, which looked like a bomb, but nobody knew that it was a science project. So, okay, let's just say that. And she goes back to her job, and she's just like, "Listen, I need to get my check so I could get this $40 to my daughter for school." All she wanted was her check. In the meantime, somebody comes in, call her by her name because she still has her name tag on. He's like, oh yeah, Miss, he looked, Jemiah. Well, anyway, so then, basically it's a stick up. And he's sticking old dude up, the old mean boss of hers. And, he went into the safe, put all the money out and everything. It's on the desk. And then, there's a stack of checks there. And so, dude ended up tussling with, he had asked for, Taraji's backpack. That was her daughter's backpack. She wasn't going to let it go. So they went back and forth, and basically, she ended up with the gun, and he came for her, and she just shot him. Fell to the ground. He was dead on arrival, okay? And so then, blood sort of splatters, and so, oh boy, the boss, he's like, look at you. You did this. You set this up, didn't you? He called you by name. Now, mind you, he looked at her name tag, okay? He just, you. This woman is already at the end. It's the straw that broke the camel's back, okay? They named the movie the right thing, Straw, okay? And so she's just like, bam, okay? Just quiet. I can't hear you no more. Okay? And, then he was dead. And so, she looked on the desk. She went through all the mail and everything, and she found her check. Now, it had blood splatter on it, but she got her check. Now, mind you, all that money was laying on the desk too. Now, if she really wanted to rob somebody or take some money, she would have took it. I mean, it was right there. She went across the street to the the community bank, where Sherry Shepherd worked, and and she like sort of took the check and banged on the door. Now, I mean, in real life, if you saw blood on the check and someone trying to get in, you probably wouldn't let them in. But they looked past that. Sherry Shepherd looked past that and just like, oh, I know her. Yeah, let her in. You know what I'm saying? Because they were about to close. They had closed up. They had a few more clients in there, but they had basically closed up. And she said, no, let her in. And so then, basically, Taraji went up to the cashier and said, hey, I need you to cash my check. And this ignorant degenerate, okay, talking about, oh yeah, oh your baby must have some candy or something she put on there and everything. And so, I mean, that was okay and everything. But the person who played that character, she just got on my nerve during the rest of the movie because she was very incompassionate. She didn't care. I understand. You're being, first of all, you in danger. Okay, you in danger. You don't know this person, but actually she did know her. She cashed a lot of her checks and she saw her with her daughter. So she just decided to be ignorant. Okay. And so Taraji just kept saying, okay, cash my check, please. Just cash my check. I got to get my daughter this $40. Just cash my check, please. She said, me, and then she told me, well, I need your ID. She said, I don't have my ID. I don't know where it's at, but me. Just cash my check, And old girl said, I can't. She kept saying, I can't do that. I can't do that. And so then Taraji just put the gun up there, and she was like, oh, and so the other girl, she tricked the side of the alarm, the other cashier. And Sherry Shepherd was like, okay, we have a robbery going on. She was in her office, and Sherry kept her cool. Now, let me tell you, Sherry Shepherd, she got down on her acting skills, too. Now, we know Sherry from being a comedian, but she plays a really, really good actress. I mean, she's a really, really good actress, And so, she was just like, okay, we got something going on here. And she knew Taraji. You knew this woman. And she saw that she was at the end of her wits, and she was just like, I just want my check, Taraji, I just want my check. She won't cash my check. What's wrong with her? And, they was screaming and stuff. She's like, oh, Taraji was like, oh, just stop the noise. She just wanted the noise to stop. She just wanted a moment to relax and just let the noise stop, And so basically they end up cashing her check. And she was like, dang, I just wanted my check cashed. I'm not trying to hurt nobody or anything like that, And so obviously she wasn't a regular bank robber or whatever, she wasn't asking for anything except for her check to be cashed, And so it was this older couple, and they were like, well, we tired of all this. And, they just went on, they walked on out the door. They walked right on out the door. Sure did, I mean, she ain't trying to shoot them or anything, because just that this is all happening all at once on her. And she's had an emotional breakdown, okay? So basically, there's a long standoff. She gets in a police officer, played by Tiana Taylor, ends up being a negotiator, and they end up having a good rapport with each other, Taraji and her. All this time, they're thinking, this little science project in her backpack is still going on. I mean, like, it'll light up, and they're thinking, oh, this is the end, and every time she went in to deactivate it, they thought, oh my God, this is the end, and it really wasn't. She was just turning the thing off, and so she finally got tired of it, and she dismantled it. She basically took it apart, and she was like, what? She was like, what? You all thought that was a real bomb? You all thought that was a bomb? Oh my good. Oh no. No. Please tell them outside. This not a bomb. It's not a real bomb. The older lady, she understood her plight and everything, because you could see everything go down by now, because the other cashier decided to go social media and put this on. It was going live. Okay, so people could see it everywhere. People in barbershops, people in beauty shops, people just working at 9 to 5. They could see all of this stuff happening, and you can tell that it resonated with people. And it's like, before you knew it, there was a crowd of people down there at the bank, cheering for, Taraji, like, free her, because they just listened to the whole thing. And Taraji pulled out chairs for everybody. Nobody had to stand up. She said, I know what it's like to stand up all day. And she tried to make everybody as comfortable as she could while she got through this crisis. Her, she had got cold at one time, and Sherry Shepherd said, I got a sweater in my office. So they went in there. She and her, they went in there, and they got the sweater. And in the meantime, they talked about her family. She saw her family picture, and she asked Sherry, when they locked me up, would you please just take my daughter? Would you please take my daughter and keep her for me? Would you promise me? And Sherry promised. She promised to keep her. Back in there, the older lady, the one cashier, she just kept popping off at the mouth, talking about, basically she's uncomfortable and she wants to go. Can we leave? Can we leave? Can we leave? If you're in a situation that you need some kind of leverage, you just can't be in there by yourself, because otherwise they'll just come in and get you, So, she needed the hostages as some kind of leverage, but they really weren't hostages, But anyway, the one lady, the older lady, she just looked over at her and she said, girl, if you ain't listened to this woman's story and had no kind of heart, I don't know what's wrong with you. You know what I'm saying? And she just like, she just didn't care, and there's people like that, they have no empathy. It's like, you're inconveniencing my day. So, the older lady, she was diabetic. So they let, Taraji, she was just so sorry. She said, I'm so sorry. She let her go. She said, please see that she gets, medical help. And so, in the meantime, she's talking to Tiana Taylor on the phone, and she's just like, well, I'm not coming out until that cop is out of there. Because by then they saw it on television that, and Taraji could see that cop was out there. She said, I'm not coming out, that cop there. Because he said he was going to kill me. So I am not moving until he's gone. And so they still trying to figure out who this cop is, So Tiana Taylor and her partner, they go through this thing of, trying to figure out who this copy is, who, told, who basically harassed her. And so, in between that, the FBI show up. They confuse things. Tiana Taylor was doing a really good job being a negotiator. Even the negotiator, the regular negotiator that came in, he was like, "No, you're doing a good job. Just keep on going. You're doing good." I would have said that. So she was doing good. So go by protocol. Everything is like shut the AC off. Do this, do that, shut the lights out, all this kind of stuff. They go by the book. Taraji had asked, Tiana Taylor, hey, off of there. And first of all, I want to confirm that you got that right guy, and I need to see it on the telephone. And so, they had shut down the phones. And so, she said, well, I need you to have the FBI, have them turn the phones back on so I can see a picture of this guy and make sure that y'all got him away from here. You got the right guy. So, the FBI guy said, I'm not turning on phones, basically. So Tiana Taylor got agitated. She walks up to the door herself. Walks up to the door, and she gives her the phone. She gives her phone, and she confirmed that it's the guy, and everything. And she said, okay. Taraji said, okay. That's the guy. Make sure you tell him that's the guy. Okay, you guys, sorry about that. And I know that the lighting is really bad too. Sorry about that too. I just wanted to finish this review on Straw. So basically, the older lady dropped some crumbs of wisdom, saying she did say this in the movie. She said that as bad as you're having it, there's always someone that's worse off. The sisterhood between Taraji and Sherri Shepherd. Sherri just wouldn't leave her side. Sherri stood up for her. And like she said, she's never had no one stand up for her. And so it just shocked her. It shocked Taraji that someone actually cared that much, And it's like you being seen, And like I said, they ended it in two ways. This is what could have happened, and this is what did happen. Okay, so what could have happened is that the FBI had its way, and they came in blazing with guns, and they would have shot her right in the heart, and she would have died instantaneously. In fact, that's what usually happens. But what happened was, after Taraji, after she found out that the cop that she was afraid of was out there, that she confirmed through Tiana Taylor that the guy had been taken away and he's going to be dealt with. Then she was a woman of her word, and she did come out. But before she came out, there was a phone call, and the phone call had mentioned that, like her daughter was no longer with her, like her daughter had passed on the day before. And that's when everything just sort of like snapped for her, and then she, you see this image of, her day, her going about her day, and what we thought we saw, we saw it because that's what she saw, okay? But basically her baby had died the day before that, and that's what caused a psychotic break, for her to have a mental breakdown, rather. And to her, she was just going about her day as usual. It was just a regular day, But, from the loss, that shock of the loss of her child. And so then she told Sherri, my baby's gone. And Sherri was like, I know. And it seems like Sherri knew for a while. I don't know exactly how Sherri knew, but maybe through a phone call, they told her on the phone that, her baby had passed the day before. Now, Sherri did remember seeing her come in with her daughter and everything, and everything like that. And so it was just really, sad and everything. And so she said, come on, girl, let's walk on out, And she was a woman of her word, and she walked on out with Sherri Shepherd, and she turned herself in. Now, right before that, Tiana Taylor tried to get Sherri Shepherd to come back. She's like, don't go back in there. Don't go back. You're being a hostage, don't go back in there. And Sherri was like, get up off of me, girl. Okay, I'm going back in here with my girl. When she come out, we come out, basically. And it was so touching. I cried a couple times in the movie. It was a really good movie. I give it an 8.5, which is really good for me. That's an 8.5. I give it. Tyler Perry did his thing on this. He showed us both scenarios, that could have happened, how it could have ended. And I think that the acting was phenomenal. Taraji did her thing. Sherri Shepherd did her thing. Tiana did her thing. So you all make sure you go watch it. It's on Netflix. Straw. Okay? And let me know what you think about it. Come back here and leave some comments, okay? Talk to you later. Bye.